Welcome everyone to this afternoon's session about the Houston Arts and Cultural Stabilization Grant. I'm going to share with you two PDF documents in the chat. One is the grant guidelines, and the other is the application at a glance. Both of these you should be able to open up as PDFs and use for points of reference. I will spend time today going through both of those documents, but using our website as my guide. So I am Christine Weil, the Director of Arts and Humanities Grant Programs for Mid-America Arts Alliance. I've been with Mid-America for 13 years and bring to my work experience as a mother of two 20-something-year-old daughters and a love of production and stage management in the nonprofit theater world. Rounding out the grant-making division of Mid-America Arts Alliance are Dave Brown and Matt Aylmore. Both of them are here in the room with us. They will be managing and manning the chat for me and be able to jump in if there are any technical difficulties. Each of them oversee a number of different various grant programs and also bring an understanding of the arts, in particular music and visual arts, to the work that they do. We at Mid-America Arts Alliance collectively acknowledge that our offices, as well as the 6-state region that we serve, are located on the occupied ancestral lands of First American nations. Mid-America's headquarters in Kansas City, Missouri, reside on land cared for by the Kansa, the Osage, and the Great Sioux Nation. We also acknowledge the legacy of slavery in our region and enslaved African people whose labor was exploited for generations to help establish the economy of our region and the United States, specifically the production and harvest of surplus crops and land cultivation. So, a little bit about Mid-America Arts Alliance. We are, as I just said, a regional arts organization, and our mission is to strengthen and support artists, cultural organizations, and communities throughout the region and beyond. Our vision is more art for more people. And we have quite a few values that are listed on our website, so I invite you to feel free to explore this and our strategic plan and other information that is on our website. We partner with a number of national partners as a regional arts organization. We are one of 6 national regional arts organizations across the country. The regional arts organizations strengthen and support arts, culture, and creativity in our individual regions, as well as across the nation. We serve the nation's artists, arts and culture organizations, and creative communities with programs that reflect and celebrate the diversity of the field in which we work. Here you can see a map, essentially, of the 6 various U.S. regional arts organizations. Mid-America is that which is in dark red on your screen. That is the lower United States, ranging from Nebraska all the way down to Texas. We also partner with our state arts agency partners here in the 6 states that we serve. That includes the Arkansas Arts Council, the Kansas Creative Arts Industries Commission, the Missouri Arts Council, Nebraska Arts Council, Oklahoma Arts Council, and last but certainly not least, the Texas Commission on the Arts. I hope that you're familiar at least with the last one of these arts partners that we have, but certainly all of them serve the region in a number of ways. So please feel free to check out their websites as well. So Mid-America Arts Alliance, you can find our website at ma.org. And right now, this is currently the image that you will find if you go to that particular website. I'm going to take us now to this drop-down list. We have a new website, so I'm navigating it kind of for the first time to a certain degree in public. So please bear with me as I go. We offer a number of grants and fellowships for individual artists. We also offer support to community and organizations. And we have an exhibitions program called Exhibits USA. Many of you may be familiar with Exhibits USA. It is a national exhibition touring program. Some of you also might be familiar with Engage, because we had an Engage program in Houston for about 10 years. It is right now on hiatus as they reconsider the ways in which that functioned and see how we can make it better and possibly use it in other places across the region and across the country. And then we have our artist grants and fellowships. Some of you may be familiar or have heard of Artist Inc. It has been active in the Houston area for quite some time. The other grant programs that you might be interested in considering are the Artistic Innovations Grant, as well as our Regional Touring Program Grant. Both of those are available to you as 501c3 organizations. Those opportunities are project focused, and we run those programs through our with Matt and Day at the head of those. So we will certainly be happy to answer any questions if you happen to drift onto those websites and check them out. So now heading on to the Houston Arts and Cultural Stabilization Grant. Mayor Sylvester Turner and the City Council approved $5 million for the Mayor's Office of Cultural Affairs to provide funding to offset and provide immediate and short-term financial assistance to the Houston arts and culture sector impacted by the global coronavirus. The program objectives that you can find if you click on that link on our website, it drops down and it's just a broad overview of what the grant program is about. We go into more detail when you click through to who can apply. So applicants must be 501c3 tax-exempt nonprofit organizations. They must be incorporated in the state of Texas. They must also be in good standing with the Texas Office of the Secretary of State. They must have a 3-year history of arts programming and compensate all of their folks that work for them at the going minimum rate, at least. You must also apply directly on your own behalf, not through fiscal agents. And you must have a valid EIN, employee identification number, which can be found on the IRS tax exempt website, but you also probably received documentation when you were incorporated. You must be in good standing with the City of Houston and ultimately commit to our grantee assurance of compliance and federal suspension and disbarment policies. That information can be found on our website. It's an assurance of compliance, essentially saying that you are following the laws of the country, non-discrimination policies, environmental and preservation policies, and other national policies. That information can be found on our website, and I'll be sharing the links to all of this information with you at the end of this presentation. Those that are not eligible to apply for this grant include individuals, nonprofits that are 501c3s that are hospitals or hospital foundations, or schools, or other school foundations. There's also some additional information about other kinds of organizations that are not eligible. But primarily, this is meant for 501c3 arts and culture organizations. This funding is available to support Houston-based artist contracts and the services the artists provide for specific activities. And also it can support salaries, full or partial, for staff at your organizations. And it can also support marketing expenses for projects that perhaps those artists are involved with or that staff is helping to support. All of the grant funds must be used starting on or after July 1, 2021, and must be totally spent by the end of this calendar year. December 31st, 2023. We've gone over what is eligible for funding. This lists simply what cannot be funded, but it's very, very explicitly stated that it is about supporting artist contracts, part-time and full-time staff, and then marketing expenses. With respect to the review criteria, emphasis will be given to organizations with arts in their mission statement, organizations that are located in one of the 10 complete communities in Houston, those that are also located in the 7 state certified cultural districts, and organizations that represent or are in service to under-resourced populations and communities. This application opened on June 1st. It will close on Friday, June 30th at the stroke of midnight. Award notification will happen on or before Monday, August 28th, and grant agreements and funding will go out in September. All final reports will be due at the end of January of 2024. And even if you have submitted all documentation because your entire application was about reimbursement, there will still be a final report, a very short final report that will be required before the end of January. Each applicant may submit one application for a grant amount of up to $100,000. If you're considering reimbursement requests, the amount awarded will be based on the organization's average budget amount over the past 3 years. So you'll need to figure that out. We will also be checking that by going into the IRS tax filings and double checking to see what your average budget is from the last 3 filings. And that will help us to determine the maximum reimbursement amount should you be requesting reimbursement for past losses that you might have incurred. These need to be losses that you actually canceled those projects, those activities, you put folks on furlough, that kind of thing that were due to COVID, and that you paid out in full or in part, and that is the amount that we will be reimbursing you for. Those things that you paid for, but they were canceled. And so it was a matter of good faith that you might have paid out an artist contract because it was canceled due to COVID. Or if staff needed to be laid off or needed time off because they were sick due to COVID. Those kinds of expenses would be allowable as reimbursement expenses. There is no match for this grant. And applicants should take into consideration their overall capacity for managing the grant amount that's requested. So can you fulfill the documentation requirements? All reimbursement requests will have documentation at the front end at the application point. You will need to submit all documentation for reimbursement requests at the deadline for application at the end of this month. Applications that are looking to submit for support of expenses going forward, activities that are happening from this point through the end of the calendar year, we're thinking of those or referring to those as allocations. And so allocated requests will require documentation at the final report time. So keeping track of artist contracts, payroll information, and the marketing invoices that you are requesting be supported through the allocation request will need to be submitted with the final report in January. If you're awarded, The grant will be dispersed in 2 payments, first being 80% at the execution of the grant agreement, and the second being 20% at the time that the final report is reviewed and accepted. Again, all of those final reports will be due at the end of January. As a grantee, you are required to sign a grant agreement that we will distribute to you. You must have a unique entity identification number at the time of award. There is information in the documents that I've provided to you about how to go to sam.gov to register for a UEI number. This is a free process. It does take a little bit of time, so you may want to go ahead and try to register for a UEI prior to submitting your application. If you don't have one at this point in time, take a moment and register for it so that you can upload documentation that you have registered for it and that you're simply waiting that confirmation so that you can submit your application. It is required as part of your application. As a grantee, you will also need to spend all of your funding, as was mentioned before, from between July 1 of 2021 through December 31st, and then complete a final report. And last but not least, all of our grantees, no matter what grant program it is, need to maintain the records and receipts for all expenses for every grant that they receive from us for at least 3 years. There is a little bit of information here about the final reporting, but we're still hashing out exactly what that will look like. And so more information about that will be distributed to the grantees at the time that you are awarded funding, so that you will be aware of what you need to be tracking as time goes by. There's information about an appeals process. Again, record keeping being very important here. Mid-America's policies and procedures are listed in a tab here on the screen. And then how to apply provides you information, not only those guidelines, as well as the at-a-glance document that I put into the chat earlier for you to download, but it also has the link to the application form. We've provided on our website a document checklist just for quick reference, so you know what kinds of documents you will need to pull together that are required for upload in the application. There is also a list of frequently asked questions that is being updated on a regular basis based upon the emailed questions that I'm receiving. I had some that came in this morning, and so this page has been updated already today. It will be updated probably once or twice a week, depending on the number of questions that come in. So I encourage you to spend some time looking at these frequently asked questions to see if more information is there that relates to things that you're working through. And then we also have another link that says still have questions, and that's where you likely came across the details for today's webinar, as well as I will be posting here, still have questions. I will be posting updated times that I will just be sitting in a Zoom room and people can drop in for office hours. This I plan to keep, I haven't updated it just yet, but I will, before the day is out, have a list of dates and times and the Zoom link where you can join me and ask any questions that you'd like. Just be aware that as you come into the room, there may be other people that are already there asking questions as well. I'm trying to make the most of our time, given that the time frame for this application is relatively short. It is due by the end of this month. And so the office hours will be open to anyone who would like to drop in to have a conversation. And it might be an opportunity to learn from one another the kinds of questions that are coming up that might be helpful for folks. We also will be answering emails at the grants@ma.org email address on a daily basis. So feel free to drop us an email, multiple emails if that helps, and we will certainly respond as soon as we possibly can. typically I've been responding almost the same day, if not within 24 hours. So those are the guidelines as they stand on our website. That is also what is in the PDF that is our guidelines that I shared with you to begin with. I will also now take us to that document that is the at a glance document. I think this will be key as you are preparing your applications. I encourage you to use this document to prepare your materials in advance. It does include everything that is in the application itself. So it includes every single question that's in the application. It includes links to places where you can find the information you might need. Those links should work if you click on them online in the PDF form that we just sent to you. So when it comes to, for instance, number 2, and you need to provide your council district information, I'm sorry, your council district information is number 6. Clicking on that link should take you to the Mayor's Office of Cultural Affairs, where you can, the City Council page, where you can plug in your address and search for your council district. It is important that your address for your organization is within the city limits of the City Council. And so if it doesn't show up on this map, you may need to call the phone numbers that are listed on this page to get clarification. Returning to the at a glance form, I want to also draw your attention to pages, let's see here, I believe it's pages 7. Yeah, pages 7 and page 9 in the document. It shows for you an example of what the request table should look like. This is both for the allocated budget as well as for your reimbursement budget. So there's an example of what that should look like, and that will need to be uploaded into the grant application as you, when you come to it. There are explicit instructions about how to use the table. I think much of this may be familiar to you, as I pulled a lot of the same language from other applications that folks in Houston have had to use in the past for their grant applications when it comes to budget tables and so forth. Aside from those things that I simply wanted to draw your attention to, the links that are associated with every single question, the information about the budget templates, the rest of this is exactly identical to the questions that are in the application itself. So I'm going to shift gears now and head on over to our application, so that I can show you a few ins and outs of the application itself, so that you're not tripped up by certain things that come up. First and foremost, this application form can be saved by clicking Save My Progress and Resume Later. When you click that button, it will ask you for an email address and a password, and then you'll need to confirm that password. Every time you save your application, you will receive an email at that email address with a link to how you can, to the application form you just saved. So we encourage you to check your email for the latest confirmation of having saved a draft of your application. You'll notice in the application that there are a number of questions that have got red asterisks behind the various fields or questions. Those are required fields. So that kind of information you will need to provide in order to successfully submit the application. We recommend very strongly that you use a Word document to craft your narratives and that you gather the documents that you need in advance so that when it comes to actually working in the application form, it's a pretty slick process where you can just cut and paste and upload documents as they come up in the application. I would also encourage you to watch for certain kinds of instructions. For instance, number 3 says, provide the organization's congressional district number. We have provided a link to a website where you can search for that if you are uncertain what that might be. In number 6, we have asked for your city council district. There too, there is a link that you can click on that will take you to that map where you plug in your address, and it will provide you with your council district information. Similarly, for 7 and 8, there are questions about the complete community, as well as the state certified cultural district. And those links should take you to those pages where, again, you can look for where you reside and make sure that you are filling in the information correctly. So just be aware that there are helpful hints along the way in the actual application form. And so feel free to refer to those and use that as much as possible. Most of the narrative sections of the application form are set for 250 words or less. So be aware of that as well. In the at a glance document, for each of the narrative questions, we do show what the word limit is. So when you're preparing your materials in advance, you'll know what the goal is, or what the limit is, I suppose. And when it comes to uploading files into the application form, you will click where it says choose file. You'll click that, and it will bring up your desktop where you can upload documents that are appropriate for that particular upload for what that's requesting. So I've simply chosen something randomly from my own desktop. If you feel that you have selected the wrong uploaded document by mistake, you simply click on it again and click cancel to remove it from the form, and you can start over and upload the right document. You can only upload one document for each one of these kinds of buttons that say choose file. And again, I will urge you to take a look at the at a glance document for any budget template examples so that you can, when you come to those sections of the application, you are fully prepared and can upload those documents at that time. So I've returned to the at a glance document just to walk through the different sections of the application. The first section is applicant organization information. That's pretty straightforward. It's the name of the organization, it's the address, that kind of information. Section number 2 is application profile, or organization profile rather. Those are the required documents that need to be uploaded. Section 3 covers questions and asks for information about who is making the decisions, who manages the organization, who represents it and carries out the business of the organization. So as you're moving through that section, be thinking about your board chair, your executive directors, that kind of information is what is needed. In the application itself, let me scroll down to section 3, you will find at times when you click a response, for instance, When it requests or asks for information about the gender, if you click prefer to self-describe, a field will pop up that says you selected prefer to self-describe, so please provide a self-description. So just be aware that as you're moving through the form, there may be fields that pop up. Don't be startled. It's simply something that you selected and it triggered in the form a request for more information. Similarly, when it comes to other identifiers for these individuals that represent and lead the organization, if you choose other, when it comes to other identifiers, you can provide additional information there that you think might be pertinent or of interest as we review the applications. Section 4 of the application is all about the organization's accessibility. There are a series of questions that are asked about the organization's website and how it provides or what it provides for folks who are attending activities and that kind of thing. The answers are yes, no, I don't know, and not applicable. If you answer no or not applicable, there will be a box that pops up to ask for more information, just so that you have an opportunity to explain those answers. It is important that since these dollars are federal dollars, that we are meeting the expectations for accessibility and in the ways in which this funding is used. So if it's about supporting an activity and artists are going to be performing in front of an audience, these kinds of questions will be very important to answer clearly and give us explanations if there's something about the organization that doesn't quite fall in track. Section 5 is about the grant request itself. We're getting into the numbers, and that's where the template for the budgets and so forth will need to be uploaded. So you'll look to your at a glance document to see examples of the budget tables. And you'll find too that in the application form itself, the question is there, the question is asked, is the organization making a grant request for allocated expenses or for reimbursement expenses? If you answer no to either of those, there is logic built into the application form that will allow you to skip a section so that you don't have to be filling in not applicable, that kind of thing. So when it asks if you have a reimbursement request, the questions about the reimbursements will pop up. But if you say no, because you're not asking for reimbursement at all, it will automatically skip section 6 and take you to section 7. And similarly, if you're not asking for allocated expenditures, then it will skip section 7. So don't be surprised if suddenly something happens in the form as you are moving through it, depending on what kinds of expenses you're looking for. Looking to cover, I should say. Again, there are budget templates in that document for your use. And lots of questions about how many employees do you have? That kind of information is important for us as we consider the ways in which this funding is used. And last but not least, we wrap up with the document checklist, which again, you can also find on the website. It's part of one of the drop-down lists on our website, but it's here also for your reference in case that's helpful as you're preparing information and materials. I feel like I have, and I know I have thrown a lot of information at you. So perhaps now is as good a time as any to take a moment, take a deep breath. And I will stop sharing my screen for the moment and see if there are, and maybe start taking some questions.
Christine, we do have some questions in the chat if you'd like to start there.
Great, that would be wonderful, Matt. If you don't mind leading me through it, that would be awesome.
Sure, and I'll try and put them in an order of most broad questions to the most specific. So the first question is this grant only for reimbursements?
No, it is not just for reimbursements. So this funding can be used for activities that were canceled or were partially paid out in the past. So it could be a reimbursement for those kinds of expenses that were incurred on or after July 1 of 2021 through the end of this calendar year. But reimbursements are considered expenses that took place between July 1, 2021 through June 1st of 2023. And then we've kind of drawn a line. We have drawn a line saying that at that point, reimbursements, the reimbursement documentation needs to be dated prior to June 1, 2023, primarily because the WHO has declared that COVID is no longer a public health nuisance in the way that it once was. We all know that it is still very much there. It's become a part of our daily lives. But that being said, for the purposes of this grant, reimbursements are for expenses that happened before June 1st, 2023. And allocated requests are for expenses that you intend to have or you are planning to have going forward. And so those activities, that documentation needs to be dated July 1, 2023 through the end of this fiscal year, end of this calendar year, through the end of December. So if you've got activities that you're planning, if you've got projects that are in the works, those can also be supported through this grant request. If you've got artist contracts, if you've got staff time that is being put towards those activities, and if you've got marketing activities that are taking place in order to boost the visibility of those activities, that's what the allocated request part of this application is for. So it's for reimbursements, but also for future expenses through the end of this calendar year.
Great, and that leads into a couple of follow-up questions, which I think you might have already addressed, but I'll ask them just in case. The question is, can you submit reimbursement for events that actually happened? And I think you addressed that by saying we have that clear line in the sand, so to speak, of before was what we're calling reimbursement, and after is what we're calling an allocation.
Correct.
The next question, similar, is it allowable to apply for reimbursement funding for a project that still happened? This person's organization pivoted to digital programming, and specifically filmed operas during the time instead of doing in-person. So to what extent would those costs be allowable?
Those, if those were paid, and it's clear that there was a loss of income because it had to pivot from being online, from in-person to online, you could provide documentation or additional information about that loss of income because it had to pivot. And those costs, I believe, could be covered or reimbursed if they took place paid in part or in full, if you had contracts for those activities.
Great, moving on. The next question is by budget. I imagine that's the template. Do you mean actual expenses and actual revenue?
For the reimbursement budget, there are documents that you could provide that are actuals. Those are expenses that were paid in part or in full in the past that you could provide. And so that would be actuals. For the allocation request, that's more about intentions. That is the budget for what you expect you will be spending going forward and on what kinds of projects and what kinds of artists. So the documentation for allocated requests is very limited, because in the final report, that's where we will need to have copies of contracts and other ways of documenting the expenses so that we can have a paper trail to show how the money that was distributed was spent.
Great. Next question is, can you verify that artist stipends are included in the allowable reimbursements and allocated costs?
Absolutely. Artists' contracts are required for both, I should say, for both the reimbursement budget as well as for the allocated budget. You need to have artist contracts in the mix. Those are required. And so I encourage you then to actually have a contract with your artists and be sure that you have that kind of thing documented.
Okay, great. Next question. Will there be a confirmation of completed grant upload? And I assume that means the application.
Once you've clicked submit, it should send you, I've tested it, I'll have to test it again to be sure, but it should send you an automated response. If you do not receive one, just email us at grants@ma.org and let us know that you did not receive notification. There are times when the system is overwhelmed and perhaps it didn't send off or trigger the confirmation email. So we can double check our systems and forward to you confirmation of what we received.
Great. And follow-up question to that. If we already submitted but want to make changes prior to the deadline, can we do that?
Email us at grants@ma.org and let's have a conversation about that. The deadline is the end of June. It's a very short turnaround time. We can reopen your applications, but then you would need to click submit and submit again, just to be sure that it was that the completed final application is received. So if you click submit by accident, or you've got something that you want to update, you'll need to reach out to us. We can reopen it, send it back to you, but then you need to be sure that it gets clicked submitted and sent in again.
Okay, next question. What exactly do you mean by promotional photo? Do you mean the logo or an event photo?
It could be either or. We are looking to have materials on hand that we can include in our promotional or press release, rather, I'm sorry, our press release when the opportunity comes around to announce who the grantees are. And so if you have a storefront, or if you have a logo, if you have other kinds of photos that you think represent the organization well, please upload that there. I don't think that it's required. I'll double check that. But that's the kind of thing that we're looking for, is something that we could use at the time that we make the announcement of who is receiving this grant.
Okay, here's a question. I don't know if we'll need to follow up on this or not. How do we find out if we are registered with the Texas Secretary of State's office?
So in the at a glance document, there is a link, and I think also on our website, there is a link to the Secretary of State's office, and you should be able to search for your organization in their database, or simply give them a call and ask them to send to you your documentation that they have on file.
Okay, another budget question. If we have volunteers, do we include them in part-time staff box, or should that be reserved for part-time compensated staff only?
Thanks for that question. The full-time and part-time staff costs are about those that are being paid. There are places in the application where we do ask for the number of volunteers that you work with. So you can include that information there, but the budget should reflect how the money is being spent, not including other information about those that are not.
Okay, do we use a physical address or PO box for headquarters in terms of the organization that's applying?
Thank you for that question. That's really important. I should have probably mentioned that before, right? We do need an actual address, a street address. So it is wherever the organization, if you don't have a storefront, you don't have your own venue, wherever it is that the organization receives its mail, what is the address that is used on the materials for your tax paperwork? That is the information that we need to have.
Great. Here's more of a practical question for the application, and also maybe an eligibility question. What if we have a combination of reimbursement and allocation?
That's great. By all means, you should feel free to make a full request for both allocations as well as for those that are reimbursements. That is totally appropriate, and it all should happen in the same single application.
Can you say more about what kind of stated policy or mission regarding accessibility is required? We feel it's implied by our overall mission statement, but it isn't outlined in an official policy by the organization.
I appreciate that. The accessibility questions often ask for more information than you might necessarily have explicitly listed on your website. And so the questions simply ask for you to answer yes, no, not applicable, or I don't know. So answer it as truthfully as you possibly can. And when more information is requested in that section, feel free to offer explanation.
Okay, switching gears to timing of allocation versus, or I guess just timing in general. For events that we did or plan to do in June of 2023, that is this month, can funds be requested for events during this time?
Absolutely. That could be part of the allocated request. And you'll know that you've got documentation ready to go. You just need to save and hold on to it until the end of your period of performance that you submit. So you could, if those activities wrap up at the end of August or end of September, we could be sending you the final report as soon as those projects, activities are finished, and we can get you the rest of the funding shortly thereafter. So you don't have to wait till January to submit your final report.
Great. Similar timing question. Should allocation projects be already in process during June, or might they include programs or exhibitions currently planned to take place prior to December 31st, 2023?
We're looking for activities that are taking place anytime before December 31st. So they can be underway, but it also could be something that you still have in the works, and you might not even have signed a document yet with an artist who, that you're planning to work with. That's all fine and dandy, so long as you ultimately do get that documentation. You can submit requests for things that are pending. We will just simply need you to confirm that those things actually did happen by providing signed documents and other materials at the time of the final report.
Great. Now we have a few questions about what we mean by loss of income due to COVID. One is asking for just a general definition. Yeah, maybe we could start there.
That's a good question. The reimbursement, it's a tricky one, isn't it? The reimbursement process for loss of income is meant to reimburse you for expenses that you paid out, even though you didn't get a return on that investment. And so that's what we're looking for. So it's activities or staff time that was spent and you paid for it, and yet there wasn't a return on that, so to speak. So that's what we're looking to reimburse you for. I hope that answered the question.
I think so. And just to confirm, it's only expenses that have been incurred due to or that represent a loss due to COVID that are eligible for reimbursement.
Correct.
And then, but when it gets into the allocated, that's probably a little bit less literal.
Exactly.
If you have a loss of income because you did not hold an event, can you make a claim based on the average income you have made in prior years from that event?
That's a good question. We would need documentation of some sort that would verify that there was actually a loss. And typically, that gets to be a little difficult, but maybe we need to have a conversation through, office hours or set another time to talk through some of those details.
Okay, somewhat related, can marketing expenses be eligible if they are for projects that include non-Houston artists?
No, these need to be, marketing for non-Houston. That's really going to be very hard for you to document, I would imagine. I mean, there need to be Houston artists that you have submitted contracts for as expenses. And then with the marketing, sometimes that's a package deal. So it would be really hard to definitively say this percentage of activity for marketing was attributed to that activity over there. I think this grant is really meant to reactivate, re-energize, and draw in tourism again, because it's been such a difficult time to rebound and get back out there. So that's a really great question. Maybe that's another one that we need to have a conversation offline, and I can start to add information into the FAQs about how that shakes out, because that's tricky.
I think a definite yes might be if those marketing expenses were part of the everyday operations that represent that loss within the reimbursement. That would be a clear yes, but other circumstances we probably would want to have a discussion.
Yeah, thank you for that. Yeah.
Hypothetically, if we decide to pursue both allocation and reimbursement, would the total ask still max out at $100,000 for our application?
Yes, it would. We will be doing the math to figure out what size of budget your organization is on average, to figure out what percentage of your reimbursement request is awarded, and then the allocation request maxes out, if that's to be added to it, maxes out at $100,000.
And a related question, do you have to apply for both reimbursement or allocated funds, or just one?
You can apply for either one. We want organizations to maximize this opportunity. And we know that a lot of smaller organizations, if we said you had to apply for one or the other, smaller organizations might not be able to submit documentation for $100,000 worth of loss in the last, since 2021, that they haven't already been reimbursed for. But they also might not be able to plan for $100,000 worth of activity coming up. So we wanted to make this available for any organization to maximize the opportunity and apply for the funding that they believe they can best manage and document in the long run.
I'm being mindful of time, so I'm trying to focus more on bigger questions, such as who reviews these grants? Is it the NEA or a MAW panel?
It's Mid-America Arts Alliance staff. There is a needs assessment tool that is built into the application form itself. And then we will be reviewing all of the various criteria, the eligibility documents and so forth, checking in the IRS systems, checking in the Secretary of State system, going through all of those various sub-monitoring processes that we do for any of our normal grants in making this decision.
Okay, can grant funds be used for non-artist vendors based outside of Houston? And this might be a good, and another person asked that question in terms of using a marketing group that is for outside of Houston for like online marketing, that sort of thing.
I don't believe that we specifically said that the marketing had to be spent on Houston-based organizations. Certainly, if it is, that's ideal, but depending on the size and scale of your organization and the activities that you do, I don't think that it would be ineligible. I believe we would be able to support those kinds of costs.
Okay. For allocated budgets, do the supporting artist contracts need to show that the artist honoraria was supposed to be paid prior to July 2023? I think in the context of an allocated budget for expenses after July 1st, the answer would be no.
I believe that's true.
But if you have a specific question, please do reach out.
Yeah.
Good question here, because this is a big thing that bears reiterating. I'm still confused that reimbursement is only for canceled events. It says that or took place in bullet point 2 of the grant amount and terms of support.
Not quite tracking on the question. I might need it reiterated again. This might be one that we need to take offline because
Yeah,
I'm
we
not.
might take that
sure.
offline.
Yeah.
But I think the thing to reiterate is that the June 1st, 2023, any expenses that would be incurred after June 1st of 2023 would be on the allocation budget, and then before June 1st, 2023, and after July 1st of 2021 would be on the reimbursement budget.
Yes. Thank you.
So it's on the reimbursement budget where things must be a canceled event. Or a canceled, something canceled due to COVID.
Sure. I'm seeing a question really quick that just popped in, so I saw it quickly, about new hires and if allocated funding could be used to support those. And yes, the answer is yes. It can be, it can support new hires, it can support current staff, it could support bringing back staff that were laid off.
And then there's been a request if we can go over the documents list that's at the end of the page. I think that might be at the on the at a glance.
Okay. It would be also the same as the document checklist that is online. So I'm going to pull up what I see and maybe share my screen real quick. Here we go. Share. So here's the document checklist. Promotional photo of the organization. Proof of registration for the UEI if you don't already have a UEI assigned to you. Corporate formation documents. The W-9. Proof of headquarters in Houston. That's simply a picture of or a scanned copy of something that's been mailed to the organization at the address with the organization's name on it. So canceled mail envelope kind of thing would be appropriate. Most recent IRS documents that have been filed or the latest financial statement, depending on your budget size. Some organizations might have financial statements as opposed to the 990 Easy or the 990. If you have spent more than $700,000 in federal funding in the current year, there is a question that asks if you have. If you say yes, then we will need subpart F of your audit. If you say no, then that's not going to be required of you. And then there's the reimbursement budget table, which then requires supporting documents for each of the line items in the budget, the reimbursement table. And then there's the upload for the allocated budget table for those activities and expenses going forward that you're looking for funding to support. And those would be the material, those would be the activities that the final report would require documentation of.
organizational eligibility question. Can a church apply?
The eligible organizations are those that are 501c3s. Most churches are not incorporated as 501c3s. So I believe the answer would be no, unless they actually are incorporated as a 501c3. But I am not aware of churches that are allowed to do so.
How soon will this recording be made available?
I'm hoping in the next few days. I hope that we can simply download this from the cloud. I'll listen to it just to make sure there's not any background noise. And if there is, then I'll re-record it. But hopefully if it's clear, then we will push this right on up, just the raw footage. We won't edit out my ums and ohs and ahs. We'll just go right for it so that people can have access to it as soon as possible.
Great. I see we have a raised hand from Rachel Stidley. Rachel, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
So sorry, that's an accidental hand raise.
All good.
No, that's good. Those are the best kind.
Let's see. Why does the grant funding only support reimbursement of Houston-based artist projects and not non-Houston artist projects if they were presented by Houston organizations?
The Mayor's Office of Cultural Affairs, through whom we are partnering in distributing this funding, they requested and said that this is really meant to be an opportunity to support those who live in and do arts activities within the Houston city limits. And so that's why some of the Houston-based language is there. It's really important that this funding that the City Council has allocated for arts and culture support is spent in that fashion.
We have Ray who has his hand raised. Ray, would you like to unmute and ask your question?
Yes, thank you very much. This has been very informative, but I do have a question. We're a cultural center, and as part of our cultural programs, we offer language classes. They're taught by independent native speaking instructors. It's just a part of our program. Would they be included as artists in your definition, the instructors?
That's a really great question. We do allow for expenses that are related to teaching artists. The question is whether or not the language piece is considered art, an art discipline. So we might need to talk about that offline, but teaching artists contracts, artists that are working, doing workshops and that kind of thing are eligible for support through this grant.
I guess I'll get a follow-up then. What about when we bring in both local, well, the outside wouldn't count, local lecturers on artistic programs such as art history, the history of opera, Pompeii? Would those stipends paid to those people be eligible?
If these are lecture opportunities that are related to your programming, I think that if the language of the agreement made reference to the arts programming that this is supporting, then those lecture opportunities could fit the criteria. Yeah,
okay, thank you.
It's really meant to support your arts programming that you have or that you're planning to have.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
And Ray, thank you for raising your hand. I just saw that I missed your question in the chat.
Yeah, that's okay.
I believe that's all the questions in the chat. If I've missed your question, feel free to write another note or raise your hand and we can. Oh, we do.
I was going to say, I'm seeing a couple of questions about one in particular about travel for Houston staff. Travel is not an eligible expense. It's about staff salaries for full or part-time staff persons. So unless that's built into their salary in some fashion and could be reflected in a payroll register or payroll journal, then the travel expenses could not be included.
Great, a few more questions. Do the artists need to be from Houston as well, or just the org needs to be based in Houston?
Both. We are interested in supporting arts, Houston-based organizations, as well as artists who are based in Houston. So those contracts should include their mailing address or their Houston location so that we can confirm that in the contracts that you're submitting.
And here's a good question. Can allocated funds be used to onboard new team members as we transition from volunteers to full-time staff? Congratulations on that transition. That's fantastic.
Yeah, that's fantastic. But the funding is clearly stated that we need to support salaries, so not the process of onboarding those folks. But if there are staff persons who are spending their time on that kind of onboarding work, then that staff time, it's staff time broadly speaking, that can be part of this allocation. So I think there's a way for that to work. It just depends on how you put your budget together.
Do salaried staff have to live in Houston?
I don't know if that's listed on a payroll register or not.
I wouldn't think so.
I don't think that it is, and those positions are crucial to the day-to-day operations. So I don't think that it's questioned as part of our review process.
Okay. Another good question. Do allocated funds need to show proof of missed opportunities because of COVID?
Allocated funds? No. Allocated funds are for activities that are happening anytime after June 1 of this year through the end of December. So those shouldn't be, one would hope, aren't impacted by COVID at all. Those are just activities that you're wanting to use to boost your audience connections and really show that you're open and running full steam ahead. This is meant to help boost tourism, to help organizations get back on their feet fully and do programming. So it should, one would hope that it's not impacted by COVID.
And the question just popped up, and those, I think, referring to allocated funds, can go to salaries and projects.
Correct. It can go towards salaries, it can go towards artist contracts, and it can go towards marketing. And I should say, I guess, salaries are full-time as well as part-time. And I double-checked with my finance director earlier today about any benefits. Can those be included in the salary line item? And he said yes.
When we say Houston, is the greater Houston area covered, or they must be from the city of Houston within the city limits?
They must be from the city of Houston within the city limits. There is a website that the city council, the city commission has that you can put your address into that website. The link is in the materials. That you can put your address into that database and it will tell you what district you are living in, or what district your organization, I'm sorry, is located in. Before people start dropping off, because I know that some already have, I'm going to copy and paste into the chat for everyone all of the various links that I have used today during the presentation and that are also listed in the application documents, the at a glance in particular. So feel free to refer to those. I will also make sure that these links are on our website for ease of reference as well. And that might help as you're moving forward. But most of those are referenced within the application itself for for at the moment that you're getting there, there should be links to places that you can go look for this information as you're moving your way through the application.
Okay, a few more questions while we still have time.
Yeah.
If your marketing is on social media like Facebook, how do we document that? I imagine that's a question of how do we document that in terms of reimbursements? I think
If there, if there wasn't money spent on it, then I'm
Right.
not sure that there's reimbursement to be made.
But if you do have a cost like Facebook ads or something, you have a receipt for that, and that would be eligible.
Absolutely.
Or staff staff that are employees that do marketing work.
Mhm, mhm.
If staff took major salary cuts, can you show that by referencing salary prior to 2021?
Yes, that would be appropriate. That would be terrific documentation for us to see.
Great. And a confirmation, the allocated funds must be spent by December 31st of 2023, or can it be spent in the season, which I'd imagine would be, the artistic season that extends past that?
Right. No, all of the funding needs to be spent by December 31st of 2023. So if your season is one that follows more of a fiscal year, like Mid-America's does, which means that it would be going into the months of 2024, those costs are not eligible. The funding must be spent between July 1 of 2021 through December 31st, 2023.
Do you have to request the full $100,000?
No, you do not. You should request what you know you can manage and what you know that you can spend, because we would hate for you to have to give us the money back. That would get complicated, and I don't think you want to do that. So you should feel free to request the funding that you feel you can appropriately manage and that can be appropriately spent. I think we had set aside time to 4:30 potentially for questions and answers and so forth, but I also think we might be wrapping up, although I see another question has come in. Are festivals considered art programming? Yes, 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 by all means. So when it comes, I see the question from Dawn, are larger organizations only able to get 60% of the allocated costs like the reimbursement? The answer is no. The reimbursement will have that percentage applied to it. The allocation up to a cap of $100,000 is available. So the 60% is only applied to reimbursement request for the size of organization that you're referencing. So for the definition, I see a question about the definition of allocated funds. These are funds that will be spent anytime between June 1st, 2023, so the beginning of this grant application being open earlier this month, through the end of December. Any expenses that are staff, either full-time or part-time, artist contracts or marketing, those kinds of expenses that will be incurred going forward to the end of this calendar year can be requested through an allocation request. I will say the artist contract is primary. That is first and foremost. You must request an artist, submit requests to support artists. That is key to this success. So, so I'll just put that out there. But that's what we mean by allocated funds. It's that time period in which you will be spending that funding. Can you ask for allocation or ask for reimbursements on office expenses like subscriptions and utilities? No, the eligible expenses are for salaries, part-time or full-time staff. Those that are related to artist contracts, which if the artist contract includes materials and that kind of thing that the artist needs to do the work that they're doing for you, so long as it's in the artist contract, that will be eligible, or marketing expenses for activities that are happening during that time frame. So the possibilities of covering expenses for offices and subscription materials and so forth, that's not an eligible expense.
Another question that's popped up in my chat is the question, is an IRS determination letter considered an organization corporate formation document?
It certainly is a form of it, sure. There are a number of different documents that you might be able to provide, and I think we allow for 3 different documents to show incorporation. It just depends on the kind of 501c3 organization that you are. Sometimes it's there's a variety of ways that that could be shown.
Another question to clarify, if we apply for allocated expenses, can we apply for both anticipated artist salaries and marketing expenses for a project that takes place by 12/31 of 23?
Yes, the answer is yes. I love the possibility that the artist is actually on salary as opposed to just on contract. That's a lovely idea that you have artists working for your organization. So that would be an eligible expense and could be listed as an artist. And then, yes, all of that.
Are
I'm seeing
public
this-
exhibitions that include artist work considered art programming?
Absolutely. Absolutely. We're talking about all kinds of public interaction. It can be exhibitions, it could be performances, it could be concerts, it could be workshops, it could be master classes. All of those kinds of activities are eligible for consideration, and exhibitions is certainly part of that.
Should we put out a last call for questions?
I think that's probably a good idea. I really appreciate everyone's time and attention this afternoon. I know it's a complicated process. This grant application is complicated. So please feel free to reach out by email. grants@ma.org is the address, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. Hopefully most of the time within 24 hours of your question, knowing that this is a time-sensitive process. By the end of today, I will have listed on the website other opportunities where you can join me in a Zoom room to just ask questions and find out more if there's things that still are kind of have you befuddled, which I would understand completely. So feel free to check that out later today. And we will also have a recording, this recording posted on our website, hopefully before the week is out. I'm not 100% sure how easy that will be to put it into our YouTube channel and all that kind of thing, but we can certainly have it up by the end of the week, I think.
Hey, well, maybe we'll just do our last few questions here.
Sure.
Do I need to show proof of being affected by COVID to apply at all?
No, the allocation part, the activities that are happening now are going forward to the end of December. It's understood that all arts and culture organizations were affected by COVID. That's a given. So if you are requesting funding support for activities that are going forward through the end of this calendar year, that doesn't require you to show a loss. We just simply need to know what you're doing and what kind of funding you need to support those activities.
Here's a happy question. Is consideration given to smaller arts organizations that meet all requirements and exhibit quality programming?
I will say that the priorities are listed in the grant application, those that are located in complete communities, those that are located in cultural districts, those that are reaching out to underserved communities, and all budget sizes are eligible for consideration. So the smallest down to, I think our bottom threshold, I think, is $25,000, all the way up to into the millions are all eligible. And so we welcome all applications. Right. I was just double checking. The minimum threshold is that arts organizations that are applying need to have at least a budget of $25,000, but then there is no upper limit. So, so the smallest of organizations that are incorporated as 501c3s that are arts and culture based, certainly those with arts in their mission, arts as part of their overall intentions, those are the ones that we are looking to support, as well as those that are located in those complete communities, cultural districts, and within the city limits. Well, again, thank you all for your time and attention this afternoon. We are coming up on the 4:30 point, and I don't know about you, but I could use a bio break. So I think maybe we wrap it up. Again, look to the website for more information about times to join me in a Zoom room if you need some clarification and would like to talk. Also, feel free to drop emails to grants@ma.org. And continue to look to the FAQ tab on the website where the grant guidelines are listed, because as questions come in, I will update that list of FAQs so that the general population, general knowledge is shared out to everyone that's interested. Thanks again for your time. I really do appreciate it. And I look forward to helping you through this application process. So please let us do that.